everybody. I thought I'd give you a little update on what I've done with my 1972 Land Rover Series 3. This may upset some of you and it may inspire others of you. So as you may know, I've been working on being able to drive my old Land Rover on the highway and pulling a trailer and so on, and I've done a few upgrades in the past on my channel, and I came to the conclusion that I still needed more power. So what I've done here, and I'll show you the process. This is not a how-to video, but this is what I did, and it may inspire you to do something similar. I will tell you some of the parts I've used on it, and you can kind of get something from it. I would say that if you're mechanically inclined and have somewhat of an adventurous spirit, you can easily do this, or if you think you need help with somebody more experienced with welding or a little bit of engineering going on with gear ratios and what kind of horsepower you're putting through this and the electrical system on automobiles, then you may want some help. So anyway, what I've done is I put a 350 small block Chevy mild cam in this truck. I put electronic fuel injection on it initially, but decided to go to an Edelbrock naturally aspirated carburetor because of the if I go out in the middle of nowhere, kind of like I am now, I want to be able to easily fix it in the field. So if electronic components go out, you're generally stuck unless you have replacement parts or spare parts that you're carrying with you. If your carburetor starts acting up, you usually can either limp home, or you can do things as drastic as, you know, gravity feed and that kind of thing if your fuel pump goes down or something like that. I also put a mechanical fuel pump in as opposed to the high pressure electronic kind. And that again is for reliability in the middle of nowhere. You can always figure it out with the mechanical stuff. So at least most people can if they're in a jam. Obviously I'm going from 65 horsepower to 265 horsepower. And when you do something like that, you need to be able to handle the torque going through the transmission, and obviously the original Land Rover transmission can't handle that kind of horsepower. It's about 300 foot-pounds of torque. So what I've done is I put an NV4500 5-speed overdrive transmission in. It's got the first gear is a granny low. So I usually start out in second, actually, and cruise on the highway at 65 miles an hour. My ratios are around, at 65 miles an hour in fifth gear, I'm at around 2,000 RPM. So that's it works really well for me, especially for off-roading, and that granny gear coupled with the transfer case, which is the original Land Rover transfer case. And they're pretty much built rock solid. They can handle the horsepower I'm putting through it as long as you don't abuse it. So I also put a P38 power steering unit in there. It works awesome. I've used a Shaganoff typical GM power steering pump with that. I put 2003 Discovery 2 axles in it. Along with that came all 4 wheels with disc brakes. I put an auxiliary fuel tank in where now I've got about close to 24 gallons as opposed to around 12, a little less than 12. And I put 33-inch tires on it. So the axles made this thing night and day. As far as drivability and safety. With the old setup, I felt like if you went around a turn aggressively, you could feel a lot of body roll. It felt uncomfortable, and I get very little of that now. Even though I don't have sway bars or anything, I get very little body roll. It hugs the road very nicely. That was one of the, other than the power, and the transmission now that's quite a bit quieter, I noticed that that's the next thing that was really a game changer here. I love this thing now. It's absolutely perfect on the highway. It's got so much power now, and it's got power on the low end when you're doing, if you want to do rock crawling or something like that. The brakes stop it. When I was pulling a trailer before, you almost couldn't stop when you hit a long grade and hit a hill, and you got to be careful not to let them get heated up. And so anyway, why don't I show you a little bit of what I've done here. I'll open the hood right now, and then I've got some other video of my journey along the way. I'm sorry if I didn't get enough for you to get a feel for it, but you know, for details, I don't really plan on, you know, doing here's, you know, a instructional video on how to do it. This is more of like what I did and what you may want to do if you're looking for more power. The thing sounds awesome. I put some two Flowmaster 40s on. I got dual exhaust going all the way back from each bank. Sounds awesome. It's not, you know, not that I'm trying to, you know, show off really, but it's just when you start this thing up and you hear it, it's just pretty neat. So I'll do that right now, actually. So here we go. Go ahead and open the hood. Put gas struts on here because I couldn't keep the the original hood strut because there's too much in the way there, and I actually had to get the radiator in here. So why don't I pick you up and I'll show you around. All right, here we go. You can see how I fit it in. What I did is I actually moved it over about 3 inches over from this side this way, so it's centered right now in with the frame rails. And that was, you know, that took a little bit of work getting the transmission lined up and getting enough clearance on the right side of the transmission with the parking brake and all that. And you know, you got to weld and do a lot of welding. You got to do a lot of cutting. I have a plasma cutter, which helped out a lot in this situation. You can see how I have the radiator and the fans positioned. I decided to put the fans in front of the radiator, and so far so good. It's running a little hotter than I'd like, probably around when you're cruising on the highway on a really hot day like today. It runs around 88 degrees. It seems to stabilize at that temperature, but I ended up putting the electric fans in, which is great for when you're stopped in traffic and that kind of thing. On cooler days, it seems to run great as far as the temperature, and you know, it's not a showstopper with the temperatures now, but I'd like for it to be, you know, around 80 to 85 degrees. So anyway, you can see that I have stainless steel headers down here. I think it's 304 stainless, and I dressed it up a little bit with the hardware to hold the alternator on, typical GM alternator. All this stuff is super simple. I got my Edelbrock carburetor here. The whole idea here was keep it as simple as possible, so that it would be easy to work on in the field and it could be more reliable. So you can see I have electronic ignition, but I will carry an extra module, which is, you know, easier to carry than a whole fuel injection computer that goes into the. I had a Phytech one in here. You'll see it in the other part of the video. But you know, that my concern would be that if that controller goes out in the FiTech, which, you know, the controller is up in the throttle body, and it just, I started having a few problems with it, and I just said, you know what, you know, because there were some things that you just don't understand about you know, setting up, programming it. I got it running great, and I'll tell you, it had more power with the fuel injection. But again, I just need super reliability, and I can't afford to always be questioning, oh, is it going to go, you know, is it going to go out when I'm 100 miles away from civilization? So I put, it kept a hydraulic clutch in there. So I'm using, I'm actually using a Jeep master cylinder and a Japanese-made sleigh cylinder on the bell housing. Got my fan controllers over here, all the wiring for that. I also put a control box in here for peripherals if I want to add them. You know, I got lights on the front here. I plan on putting another light bar in the back, so I can show you in here the controller for that. Here. So that's a controller for that. And it's got 8 channels on it. While I'm here, why don't I show you the system I have for the, might have to put you down here. So with the auxiliary fuel tank here, I ended up, I tried different things. I thought I was going to get creative and use the vacuum draw from the pump going from the primary tank over in that, under that seat. I thought I could use that to siphon the fuel out of this secondary tank or aux tank. It worked great as long as one of the tanks didn't expand. So the problem was, if this tank started expanding, it would dump fuel in the other tank, and if that was full, it would actually overfill, come out the filler cap. Not a good situation, very dangerous, so I quickly figured out I can't do that. It did work for a long time though. It just, I could smell gas, and then I started looking into it, and the delta between the pressures, like if this tank is sitting in the sun and that one's not, this one would get more pressure than that one. It might dump it when you don't want it to dump, when it's already full, or vice versa. That one could expand and it would dump fuel in this tank, and this one would get too full. And so it became a nightmare after a while. So what I did is I put this pump in here, electric pump, and then I have a solenoid valve here. So it can never, when that tank on the other side expands, it will never try to, it will just breathe through the cap, and it won't breathe back through here, pumping, you know, dumping fuel back in here. So I also put a switch up in here for the sender unit. So both tanks have a sender unit, and I just switch it back and forth when I want to know how much fuel's in each tank, and that's tied, you know, to the gas meter here. So I did some other things. I put a digital thermometers in here. I put a tachometer right here and a voltmeter right here. I like to monitor voltage. Kind of tells me more than amperage. It just, I get a better feel for what's going on with that. So anyway, give you a side view here. You know, these are the 33s it's telling you about. And the dual exhaust. I bought one of those Mantech tire mounts. I was mounting the tire on the hood up here, but these tires are too big for that kind of thing, so I ended up having to move it to the back. I actually like it in the back a little more because you get better visibility if you're rock crawling and that kind of thing. Not that I do a lot of rock crawling either. You can see the flow masters down in here. They're stainless. I got the stainless ones. They painted them. I'm not really sure why they painted the stainless, but you can see the paint's just kind of flaking off once it got hot. I put Tom Woods heavy-duty drive shafts in too. They're custom made for my application. So yeah, so I had to cut out the mounts, the engine mounts, and then shift everything over. I had to cut the cross member out for the transmission and move it back. You'll see all that in the next part of the video, but you can see here how I had right where the wire harness is right there. That's a little cutout right there, and I had to do that for the headers. You can see the header, how close it is there. It's just the right clearance. I put some cloth there that can reflect the heat and keep the headers from cooking the paint off. But that was really, as far as the bulkhead was concerned, that was the only thing I had to do different except for the transmission tunnel. So let's show you that real quick. So you can see the NV4500 shifter there, and you can see what I did with the tunnel right here. So it actually was not super hard. You just got to know how to cut metal and weld things and trim things and bend things, and it really came out pretty good. I couldn't. One of the things I was thinking about doing is putting one of those the mats in here to deaden the sound, because it is a little noisy in here. Don't get me wrong, but it's actually a lot quieter than the 4-cylinder was, except for the rumble of the exhaust system on this thing. When you're cruising, it's a lot quieter on the highway because that NV4500 5-speed isn't winding out. You don't hear those gears at all, really. You can hear a little bit of the transfer case, but not super annoying like it was. I used to have a Rover drive on here. You may have seen it in one of my other videos.